What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? I'm going to orientate this a little bit better. And we're going to get ready to go. All right. What's up, everybody? It's good to see you all here. We've got people chiming in. I'm looking at two different things here. We got people from Spain. What's up? Spain in the house. Ricardo. What's happening? Good to see everybody. Hope y'all are doing well out there in the world. Hope that you are safe and sound. Hope that your families are safe and sound. Crazy times in our life, but it's all good. We're getting to it. We're going to make the best out of a bad situation. Jeff Coffin is on. Is that Jeff Coffin I saw? What up? What up? What's up, Detroit? Detroit's in the house. Good to see y'all. I think I'm going to switch my computer over here. It'll look a little better. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better. Hello, hello, hello. James Suggs, what's up, man? Good to see you. My man. Always great to see you. Got folks from Barcelona, Spain. Will Hazelhurst, what up, what up, what up? Good to see y'all. Virgin Islands in the house. What's up? Nevada. Hey, hey, hey. Good to see y'all. Right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and get started, y'all. My inspiration for doing this is that for the first time in my lifetime, I felt that uh, musicians all over the world, and not just musicians, of course, all people are being forced into isolation right now. And it's important to look at the glass half full and not half empty. What do these challenges present to us as opportunities? And one of the opportunities that I feel right now is that we are all sort of being forced to do what Charlie Parker did. And what Bird did was go into the shed. Now, just a brief version of that story. Charlie Parker went to check out the Basie band, and Joe Jones was the drummer. And Bird had been shedding, he was getting a little bit of local notoriety. And he went and sat in with the band, and he was pretty sad on what he was playing. And the story goes that Joe Jones took a cymbal and threw it at his feet, and it made a big crash, and it really embarrassed Bird. And so Bird went home, packed the stuff up, went home. And then after a while, he got some resolve, basically saying, I'm not going out like that. I'm going to go into the shed, go into the wood shed. Out of, some people were saying it was out in the mountains for several months. Some people say it was even a couple of years. And he basically practiced hour after hour every single day. And when he came out of it, he was Charlie Parker. How does that apply to us right now? Well, in a weird way, I feel like this COVID-19 virus is that ride cymbal. It just crashed on all of us, basically checking us and sending us all into a state of isolation. Now, that could be pretty daunting to you. It's like, whoa, what am I going to do? I'm sitting here all day, technically by myself or with family members. What do? I don't have a schedule anymore. I don't have classes to go to. What am I going to do? Well, I just want to give you a little bit of advice with this and a little something to think about uh, while you're in this time. Okay. So 3 points that I want to make about being in the shed. One, you want to discover at this time who you are as a player. Now, what does that mean? Discovering who you are as a player involves you doing a few things. One, the first thing is be honest. I was talking to a good friend of mine yesterday or a few days ago, Keon Harrow, about honesty in music. Now, when you're honest about who you are as a player, you're honest about a couple things here. Those things being your influences, okay? And those influences are things that, one, you choose, and also things that they're just a part of your environment growing up. I grew up in Ohio. I grew up in a Pentecostal church. I was in church all the time. So naturally, that's going to be something that I hear. Now, just a quick story about me. When I started to grow up and I started to play out, some people actually said, "Oh man, forget that gospel music. Why are you trying to sound like that? Why are you playing with that soul?" And I kind of just decided that I was going to avoid that for a while, just be a straight up bebop player. But then after a while, I said, you know what, this is me. I have to be me, and I started to think about how I was going to make that a part of my sound. You know, um, one another thing to think about regarding your influences. Again, it's what you grow up, your environment, but also what you choose. I had to turn on the light, y'all. Sorry. But one of the things that I decided to do was pick my top three main trumpet influences. And those top three influences are Freddie Hubbard, Woody Shaw, and Clifford Brown. And then I remember reading Miles Davis's autobiography, and they said, Miles, how did you get your sound? And Miles said he put all his favorite influences or all of his influences in a funnel, and what came out was him. So that's what I did with Freddie Hubbard, Clifford Brown, and Woody Shaw. Put them all in a funnel, and basically what came out was me with a little bit of gospel sprinkled on top. So honesty and also choosing your influences, right, are some things that you could do. Um, Another thing to think about is, what do you want to do in 10 years? Have goals. There's a whole point. You need fuel for your fire. You have to have a point for doing what you want to do. Now, the way that I came about this was my English teacher in I believe it was 10th or 11th grade. Her name was Susan Fowley. She gave us a writing assignment, and that assignment was to write a letter to our parents telling them what we would be doing 10 years from that moment. I was 16 years old. So I wrote a letter to my mother, and that letter said, "Dear Mom, I will be a college professor. I will be a recording artist, and I will be Wynton Marsalis' friend." Once I wrote that letter out and I told my mother those things and it became real in my head, that set me on a path to make it happen. I started to look out 10 years from that point. Wow, 26. This is what I want to be doing when I'm 26. Well, how do I get there? So those goals then went into plans. You dig what I'm saying? So I worked backwards. Okay, what do I need to do in the next, I don't know, increments of 3 years? Then those 3 years, I broke down into yearly goals. Then I broke those yearly goals down into monthly goals, weekly goals, and that eventually led to my daily practice routine, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Okay? It's very important to ask yourself in this moment, and you got plenty of time to do it now. Ask yourself, what do I want to do once this is all over? Okay? What do I see in the future? Project and plan. And then that will lead you to your practice session. Okay? Now, we're in this time, we're isolated. Seems like we have tons of time. But we could also waste tons of time. You could wake up late. You could kind of just be on social media all day because everybody's living on social media. I mean, we're doing it now. Um, it's very important to have a schedule. Okay? So I would challenge you during this time, and it's a good time to do it, is Sunday night. Sunday night, you can do like weather people do, right? They give you the week in view. Just plan out every single day when you're going to practice, how much time you're going to allot to practice, how much time you have to listen. Plug that in and create a schedule for yourself so that you're maximizing your day. Okay? Make sure you get up early. Okay? It's still time to make sure that we maximize as much time as we possibly can if you want to go in the shed. Okay. Also, this requires discipline. I remember the couple years of my life in undergrad and grad school that I forced myself to get a certain amount of daily practice in every day just to get my level up. Okay. So getting up in the morning, setting your own schedule, it's your plan, and it's going to require discipline, long-term discipline in order to make this happen. Okay. Now that practice session, I've gone over this a few times, and it's actually I talk about it on Open Studio Network. By the way, you can check that out, openstudiojazz.com, and see what those cats going on. And they're hosting it. Shout out to Open Studio. Open Studio. All right. My practice routine consists of 3 different stages. Okay. The first stage is what I call the pedagogical routine. The pedagogical routine consists of everything that it takes for you to be pedagogically sound on your instrument. So, what is that? That's technique. Talking about scales, arpeggios. If you're a wind player, you're talking about sound and breath and keeping that elevated. Articulation. Drummers, you're talking about rudiments. Piano players, touch scales, whatever you do to be pedagogically sound on your instrument. That's the first thing you do. Okay. And now we're talking about the shed. This is a good time to really, truly focus on those things, because the more technically sound you are, the more you're going to have the ability to be able to play anything that you hear in the moment, no matter what tempo it is. Okay. So if I'm playing and I hear something crazy, it's like, whoa, what is that? Let me play it. I don't have to think about that. I have the technique that affords me to be able to do that. Okay. So again, technical proficiency that is worked out in your pedagogical routine. Now that routine for me, and I put a time period on these things. Again, we're talking about a schedule. Okay. So in order to have a tight schedule, you got to have time allotments. For me, I when I was in my main development stages, that was between an hour and a half to, hour 15 minutes to an hour and a half of just technique. First thing you do during the day. Now, before you do that, I would suggest you take 15 minutes to do nothing. No social media, no no TV, none of that. You're basically centering your mind around what it is that you want to do. Okay. And then 15 minutes afterwards of assessment, assessing what you did in that session, having a plan. Okay. Then I take a break. Okay. The next thing I like to do, what's up? What's up? See you over there. The next thing I like to do is after I take that break, it's about an hour, is I do a reinforcement of the pedagogical routine. Okay. And the reinforcement of that, I do etudes, classical etudes, specifically for the trumpet, because most of the pedagogy of the trumpet is coded in the European classical tradition. So I'll do etudes, I'll do some orchestral exercises and all of that, so that my technique is 100% solid and I can apply it to various phrase settings. Now, some people would ask, well, what if I don't play classical music, or what if I don't have access to etudes? Okay, perhaps you do more of the rudiments or application of that rudiments and certain uh, solos that you're working on. Could be anything, as long as you're applying your technical workouts in that pedagogical routine to your reinforcement routine, then you're getting that much more reinforcement on those. You're making it solid, okay? A lot of time devoted to technique. Why? Again, the music that I hear, I want to make sure that this is not in the way of it. Okay? I want to be technically sound on my instrument. Okay? Um, then I take another break. By the way, that is about an hour long, could be an hour and a half. So now we're at about 2.5 hours to 3 hours. Okay. Then finally, my next routine after I take another break is my musicianship routine. Now, this routine, when you're in development, in my opinion, should focus on what you want to be the foundation of your career. Okay, so in that letter that you write to your folks, if it says, if the genre that you're thinking about is jazz, if it's classical, it's a funk, hip hop, whatever it is, that's what you want to focus on the most during this time. Okay, so if you're working on your jazz vocabulary, you're transcribing. When you're transcribing, you're extracting some of that material and applying it to other tunes. You're learning tunes, you're learning harmony, you're sitting at the piano, you're doing all of those things and working out what you need to work out in that genre. That's about an hour and a half. Okay, so now we're about at maybe 4 hours, 5 hours of practice. Well, guess what? That's not a lot of time if you think about it in terms of a full time job and what you want to do for your career full time. I want to play jazz full time. I wanted to have my own band. I want to do that. So guess what? That's what I focused on. Okay. And a typical full time job in the United States is 8 hours. Okay. So if we're working out 4 hours to 5 hours a time, that's really part time. All right. And the rest of the time I'm listening. It's the other thing. Listen a lot during this time. Listen to music that you've never heard before. Go down a rabbit hole. If you haven't heard all of Charlie Parker's tunes and his records, have a Charlie Parker day. Have a Freddie Hubbard day where you just literally go through all of those albums and the things that those people played as a side person. Okay. Again, it's going to take discipline to do this. Even though we're at home or wherever we are in isolation, hours could go by just by hanging out with your friends on Zoom, checking out this person's live feed, this, that, and the other. It's going to be incumbent upon you to set time frames around that where you're not allowed to do that. Okay? Social media, TV, all of that. Give yourself a time limit for that so that you don't fall into the abyss of just kind of chilling. Okay? It's a mindset. So if you really want to take this time to go in the shed, you're going to have a lot of discipline going on here. Okay? So that's how I feel regarding exercise. The final thing I want to talk about is this is going to be over at some point. We're all going to come out of this and everybody's going to be fine. The question is, who are going to be the survivors? Okay? Things are changing right now. People are finding the ability to record, to do things mobily, unlike they've ever been able to do before. So the way that you network is going to be extremely important. Join different groups on Facebook. Don't waste your time joining platforms that don't help you get better at your craft. Okay, network with different people from different schools. Talk to your teachers. Have a plan for when you graduate. Not when you graduate. Have a plan for when you get out of this quarantine situation. Meet new people. Go to clubs. Go and sit in with people. The stuff that you're working on in isolation, come back. Just like Bird did. He came back on the scene on firing on all cylinders. Okay? So really go and take the opportunity to show the best of who you are once you come out of this. All right? So cool. Those are the three things I think about. Now I'm just going to go and look at some questions that were submitted yesterday. All right. One question says, bebop masters such as Bud Powell, Monk, and Charlie Parker did not learn bebop by listening to others, but by figuring it out. What did they practice that helped them create the bebop language? That is a great question. They were the inventors of the music. Now, there's an old saying that says, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just variations of things, right? So I would venture to say that they went and experimented. They did exactly what I mentioned earlier. They asked themselves, what are the foundations of what we're doing? What is it that we come from? Okay, Coleman Hawkins, uh, Lester Young, Louis Armstrong. They took that harmonic and rhythmic information and expounded on that their way by getting together and experimenting with one another. Now, I would also venture to say that they were explorers. They checked out classical music, they checked out pop music, they checked out everything, and they manipulated certain things while experimenting to find this new type of language. Well, you can't do that if you don't have a strong foundation and a strong pool of tools to work with. Okay, that's why I say it's important to have your instrument together. It's important to know harmony. It's important to know melodic structure. It's important to know compositions. Okay, composition. So that's something that I feel that we should all do during this time. The world is never short of individual voices. However, those individual voices, in order to be heard, you have to have refinement. And that's one thing you can work on during this time. Great question. I'm going to go to an online question. All right. One specific trumpet question says, what did you do to expand range? That's something that John Faddis talks about a lot. But before I met Faddis, in order to work on my range, I actually took the exercises that I know and I play all the time, and I expand them. Basically, any book that you get with these exercises in it, they can't write all of those ranges in it. Otherwise, every book would be this thick, you know? So I take those exercises like Clark's and I play them in the lower octave and in the upper octaves. For example, Clark 2, okay? Just because it's not written in the book up the octave, I still play it up the octave. Okay? Again, I'm taking existing exercises that I already do and I'm expanding those exercises in registers. Now, one thing that Faddis does is he actually plays triads, starting on D concert, uh, fourth line D, and he ascends basically until you can't ascend anymore. And you don't push, you don't press, you don't force the notes out. You play them softly in order to be able to allow the vibration to speak. So this is a little example of that. Now, at some point, you're going to reach your apex, and it's going to sound something like this. Notice the top note didn't speak. Now, I didn't press to try to make the top note come out. Okay? No pushing, no pressing, no forcing. You just keep playing through that and keep ascending because you can hear the overtones in the sound trying to come out. Playing high isn't just about having the chops to play high. It's about knowing where the overtones are on your instrument, knowing where the slots are. Okay? And so it takes a little bit of exploration in order to do that. So I'll keep going and it'll sound like. Notice voice is not speaking, right? But after a while, you'll be able to find those slots without playing loud. Right? And you just keep going by finding the slots. Great question. Let's go back to some of those questions that were submitted yesterday. Okay. What process do you use to move from transcriptions to incorporating information received from them when you're playing? That's a great question. In other words, how do you take the material from your transcriptions and adopt it to other situations? Well, when you're doing a transcription, one of the most important processes in the transcription process, yeah, say that twice. One of the most important things to do is before you extract the material from the transcription, it's going to be important for you to analyze it on a micro level and a macro level. Okay, now what I mean by a macro level is the bigger picture of the solo. Okay, so if you're playing a blues and it's a line that happens for the last 4 bars of the blues, you take that and figure out, okay, what's the shape of it? Is it fast? Is it slow? How does it relate to what came before it? Big picture stuff. You also want to analyze on a micro level, and that micro level has to deal with what a person plays specifically over a chord, or how they resolve something specifically, something minute. Okay, so macro and micro level analyzation. And then once you do that, you extract certain pieces that you like and adopt it to other pieces that are similar and have similar chord changes. And you do that by targeting. So if I'm on a blues and there's 2 5s at the end of a certain blues progression that I like that in the transcription, I'll take that set of information and I'll apply it to another tune that has a similar 2 5 on it. So you start to figure out how to mix and match things and where to put them. That's extremely important. Great question there. All right, I'm going to go back and look at a couple other questions here. It's good to see so many people on. I appreciate that. Good to see you all. Someone had a question about articulation. How do you work on articulation? Okay, articulation for me is basically one of the hallmarks of your sound. Your sound is not just the tone that comes out of your instrument. Your sound is also simultaneously how you fit inside the rhythm and how do you fit inside the time. Okay, and that has a lot to do with articulation. Now, for a brass player, your articulation is going to come from the patterns that you create with your tongue. Clark Terry had his way of playing. Clifford Brown had his way of playing. Some people play softer. Some people play more staccato in their pitch. For me, I did 2 things to create my way of articulating. Okay, the first thing is I worked on my tonguing. Okay, so I practiced multiple tonguing a lot, and slur 2, tongue 2s, and like bebop scales. Example of that is this. Okay, doing that. I also work on double, triple tonguing, and I isolate the different parts of the double tongue and the triple tongue. For example, the double tongue is a two-ku. Two-ku. Okay, so I isolate that 2. That's the 2. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Then I isolate the ku, 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 ku. Now I'm saying ku, not ka. Okay, if ka is a lot further back in your throat, so I don't want that kind of tension in my playing. So I'm thinking Q, almost Q, two Q two Q two. The Q is more forward. So this is the Q by itself, and I'm trying to make that sound exactly like the two. All right, trying to get them as close together as I can. Then I practice it backwards. Ku tu ku tu ku. All right, then I practice it the regular way. Tu ku. And then I try to play a little game with myself to see if they all sound the same. All right, that was all four versions. Hopefully, they sounded pretty similar together. Now, you might ask yourself, well, how does that jive with playing bebop? Well, again, technique is not about genre. Technique and genre are two separate things. All right. The point of gaining a lot of technique is so that you can basically apply that technique to any genre if you have the oral conception of what that genre is. Okay. So I've worked for years on being able to literally play anything on the trumpet that I can get a hold of, so that when I got a call to play whatever gig, I had it together. For example, before all of this happened, I was supposed to be playing this piece of music. It's called the Zimmerman Trumpet Concerto, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, if you look at the stuff on this page, it's wild. It's wild. And the reason that I took it upon, I took this gig. The one, I liked the piece, and number two, I knew it was going to be the challenge of my life at this point. Okay, I'm constantly trying to play stuff that I can't play. I'm trying to do things that I can't do. There's always another level. I'm always trying to get there. So that's really important to think about. So going back to articulation, the beat itself is very important to think about when you're playing. Your tongue is the equivalency of the drummer's ride cymbal. So how you articulate is going to help define who you are as a player. You know, that's more like something that Clifford Brown would do. This is something like Freddie would do. Okay. So, and then just knowing those styles, I know how to imitate these people. So you got to study what comes before you, figure out what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and then go in that direction and work on it until you can sound like it. All right. Good question. I'm going to go back to something that's online or on the questions asked earlier. Okay, great question here. How important was composing in your development as a musician? Any tips on how to approach composition? Whenever I set aside time to compose, I feel overwhelmed when I actually sit down to do it. Yeah. I feel like I have more tangible direction when working out tunes or 2/5 progressions or technique or whatever else. Okay. Um, Another great question. Composition for me just kind of happened out of a need to express myself. To be frank with you, the first tune I ever wrote is a piece that I wrote for my father called John, and he was dying. We knew he was in the hospital, and we knew he was going to transition at some point. And in school, I was working on this chord. I was working on a Phrygian chord, right? And I was like, and the more I heard this Phrygian chord, it was E Phrygian. I would resolve it to A major for some reason. E Phrygian to A major. And I played it over and over again. And I'm like, well, this is kind of sounds like 5-1, even though it's not, because you hear tension to release, tension to release. Now, mind you, this is me just diving into harmony over and over again. It's that basic idea of 5-1. So E Phrygian to A major. And I just sat down at the piano and I started to hear a melody. I started hearing that. And I just went down the rabbit hole and tried to work out a good bass line to go with this melody that I was hearing. Almost as if the melody and the bass line are two counterpoint melodies working together. Fuchs actually calls that, in a treatise on counterpoint, he calls that auditioning the bass. And I just went down the rabbit hole and allowed the song to be born. Um, Composition, a lot of times, is tough if you don't have a plan. Um, you could give yourself composition exercises. One good thing to do is take existing chord structures and write new melodies on them, new contrafacts, okay? Or taking existing forms and adding certain things to them. Like one thing that I like to do is play with the blues form. It's a 12-bar blues. I've written blueses that are 8-bar blueses. I've written blueses where I literally took a bar and added it to each part of the blues form. Okay, so I do that. Also, you have to study tunes that aren't just your standard 2-5-1 type tunes like rhythm changes and things like that. I would challenge you to check out some of Bill Evans' compositions. One of them being "Time Remembered." Check out some Tom Harrell. Uh, Check out more modern approaches to harmony, dolphin dance, and just really explore how those structures work, and then try to write over that. Um, Another thing to think about regarding composition is where to start. Where's the germ going to come from? Sometimes you can start with a chord progression. Sometimes you can start with just a groove. Sometimes you start with a bass line. I've written tunes with bass lines. Okay. Sometimes it's just a haunting melody that loops over and over again. But the thing is, I guess what I'm getting at is that there is no real right place to start. Okay. You just kind of have to do it. And the more you do it, the more you get better at it. You start to find out your voice. You start to find out things that you naturally hear. And I go in that direction. I have like a Where's Waldo chord progression in most of my albums that I put in there on purpose just because it's me. So that's something to think about as well. Good question. All right, I'm going to go back to our live questions here. Let's see. Says I have been. That's Lil Ling 719. What's up? What's up? What's up? Says I've been listening to jazz for a long time, but I want to start going to jam sessions. So what do you need to practice in order to do well at jam sessions? That's a great question. Um, the first thing you need to know about a jam session is that it is a scene. Okay. And inside of every scene, there are general practices. Okay. So if I were someone that's new to a scene, the first thing I would do is observe, see what's going on, who's playing there, what's the vibe, is it open, is it not as open, who is getting called up to play, why are they getting called up to play, who are the main characters, all of that kind of vibe. So I would go just for a couple of weeks and just peep it and just check out what's going on. Also, take notes of the tunes that are played a lot during the jam session. Okay. When I lived in Pittsburgh, there was shout out to my Pittsburgh people. There's a jam session held by Roger Humphreys, who was the drummer for Horace Silver, and he played a lot of those tunes. Okay, Room 608, Song for My Father, Nutville. So when I started going to these sessions, I'm like, okay, he's playing a lot of that stuff. I need to learn it. Okay, learn the tunes that cats are playing on those sessions. One of the biggest drags about going to a session is when people come. First of all, people come towards the end of the night, so they don't even hear the house band playing. So they come in and then they come in and they ask to play tunes that nobody on the gig knows or has heard of, and it just wastes time. Okay, so learn who's in the house band, check out the scene, learn their music, and then it creates a sound and a scene. That's very important to do. Also, be prepared. You know, pick five tunes that they've been playing on the session, go. And if they don't play those five tunes, don't play. If you don't know them, don't do that to yourself. First impressions are lasting. So you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward all the time. That's a great question. We'll go to another online question. Is that really Charles Lloyd? If that really is Charles Lloyd, what's up? It's great to see you if that is you. Uh, there's a lot of people that are answering questions. That's good. A lot of good commentary on here. Great stuff. All right. Somebody asked a question. Another good question. What am I listening to and working on right now? Um, I'm actually listening to a lot of different things. I'm listening to different hip hop records that I never really got a chance to really dive into. I'm listening to a ton of Donald Byrd, a ton of Donald Byrd. He's becoming, specifically the '70s Donald Byrd. Um, there are a lot of hidden gems in that music that is just fantastic for me. I'm also listening to a lot of world music, Indonesian music, uh, Brazilian music, and I'm just kind of thinking about where I want to go next in my direction and what I want to put out. I'm working with a couple of different bands. I'm working with the Baltimore Jazz Collective. We've been doing a lot of composing for that. I'm also working with a group called Dizzy Spells, where it explores Dizzy Gillespie's influences and his spirituality. I'm also working on another album, which is kind of like going to be my own little autobiography, um, which is pretty interesting. I'm diving pretty deep into myself. That's my shit right now. And I'm also doing a lot of work in education. I'm fortunate enough to be at Johns Hopkins University at the Peabody Conservatory of Music. I'm the chair of that department, and we're growing fast. We've already tripled the size of the department. We're expecting to do the same next year. We're excited about that. We're actually going to have a whole new wing on Peabody's campus, which is awesome. And I'm also the president elect of the Jazz Education Network. So my hands are full. Um, and a lot going on in personal life. Got a newborn. So life is good. Can't complain. Um, Getting back to the questions. Uh, y'all got to get a better camera. That's my phone. Hey, well, you can't win them all. um, Another good question is jazz college worth attending? Um, it depends. It depends on the person. If you need structure, if you need guidance, and a set plan of action, then college is good for you. If you're someone that generally likes to work more on their own, if you're somebody that likes to find it on themselves, or has a very specific way of doing things for yourself, then it might not be for you. There is no right or wrong way to do it. I would say that ask yourself, What is it that I want to get out of school? What is my path? Are there specific environments that I think would help me out a lot with what I'm doing? Then then go in that direction. Seek counsel. Ask people. Okay, that's important to do. For me, college was important because I needed that regimen. I needed that focus. Okay, really needed. It was important. Um, but hey, there are cats that don't go to school either that do well. Excuse me. It's really up to you and what you want to do. You got a couple cats asking about the lighting. Let me see if I can fix the lighting. Or wipe off the camera a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's better. Maybe it's not. We'll work on it more. All right. Going back to more questions live. Um, how do you maximize time while having a family? Schedule. Schedule, man. You got to work it out. Very important. Um, get up in the morning. Get up before your kids get up. This is, again, this is all new to me. So I'm figuring it out myself. It's really important to get hours in where you know you could find the hours and make it a priority. That's really important. Also, you got a trumpet, get a practice mute. Have a way of being able to get the sound in whenever you can. And also, I'm not one of those people that believe that you should separate what you do from your kids. You know, if you're a musician, your kids can be right there with you while you're shedding. I mean, it's a part of who you are. It's just going to help them be a better person. They're going to say, hey, mom and dad, this is their vibe. This is what they do. Boom. You know, and they're just right in it with you. Perhaps they'll be inspired, you know, listen to music with them. So I don't, cats have done it for years. I just, again, think it's important to schedule and also not separate them from what it is that you do. All right, more questions. Uh, let me see. That's a great question. Mark, it says, when you're working on something specific in your practice, what are your requirements for feeling that you have learned something fully and can move on to the next concept? That's a great question. Thanks for that. The proof is in the pudding. That's what it is. If you can play it, then you can move on. But I think the question that you're asking requires a deeper level of honesty. It's like, this is one thing that you hear trumpet players do all the time in the key of E flat concert. They're burning in E flat concert. But E, not as clean. For me, in any exercise, the weakest key is where I force myself to play everything. That's what I do. So if I can't play in G, right? If I if I do that, then I slow it down, right? Very important. You have to force yourself to be disciplined and always deal with your Achilles heels. And then when you can do something and it's clean and it sounds good, then you click it up. Click it up a notch. Also, I like to be a storm chaser. I don't like to play stuff that I know I can play well. I like to play stuff that I can't play. I like to try to do stuff that's hard. And another thing is, in social media nowadays, everybody wants to play on social media and show what they're working on. What they're working on. Let's be real. Nobody's going to go on social media and play something that they sound like shit on. It's just not going to happen. Okay? Nobody wants to look bad on social media. So what happens is a lot of people record themselves practicing and they're not practicing. They're just playing what they can play well. That's not practicing. Practicing is basically doing or working out what you can't do until you have a level of proficiency at it. And then when you reach those benchmarks of success, you move on to the next thing that you can't play. Practicing, my definition of practicing is we base it. Okay, here's the definition of practicing. It is the repetition of an action that gives you the results that you're looking to achieve. It's the repetition of an action that gives you the results that you're looking to achieve. So, if I suck at the key of E, guess what I'm going to be doing? Until it's crystal clean. I want my sound to sound like a clear white canvas, right? No obstruction, no nothing, like no junk in it at all. I want it to be crystal clear, crystal clear. And then once it's crystal clear, I start to click it up. Nope. Then I slow it back down again. Right? Cleanliness. I ask my students all the time, I'm like, listen, if Martin Luther King sounded like Kermit the Frog when he delivered the I Have a Dream speech, would that speech be as profound? Would that speech have gotten the reach that it gotten? I don't think so. It was the message, yes, but it was also the way it was delivered. So a lot of times we go to school, we get all this vocabulary and all of this, but we can't deliver a message. There's no sound, there's no point, there's no humanity behind it. You have to practice that stuff too. And that is extremely important. Okay. Cian Murray. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Is it Cian or Cyan Murray? Do you ever feel discouraged while you're practicing? Every day. I feel discouraged every day. If you didn't feel discouraged, then something would be wrong. The whole point of practicing is to give you some truth serum, right? If you go into the practice room every day and you feel like, yeah, I sound great, then you don't need to be in the practice room. You're in the practice room because you're identifying the things that you cannot do well and you're working on them until you can do them well. Okay? That's very important. Okay? Discouragement. Continued discouragement is a different thing, right? If you feel like it's just a drag to go in to the practice room every single time, it's like, oh, I'm not getting any better. I'm not getting any better. You may be at a plateau. But it's important to understand that success is not this way, right? Development doesn't go that way. Development goes this way. Click, then you're in a plateau. Click, then another plateau. Then click, then another plateau. But you're still moving forward, okay? It's very important to consider that, all right? But that was a great question. Mr. Shawnee Ross, you got a hand raised. All right. And yeah, cats, let's keep it respectful on the chat. You know, one of the things about social media too is, you know, everybody can hide behind that little typewriter. Don't be dragged. Don't be dived behind the typewriter, man. You know, be cool. All right. Mister, if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. Okay, another question is, how do you work on keeping repertoire up, new versus old tunes? One of the things that I talk about a lot is keeping a sort of a meditative mindset in music all the time. So I'm constantly thinking about all of the tunes that I've ever learned, all of the material that I've ever learned. Like I don't learn it and then it's like, oh, I don't need it anymore. It's not like geography. or it's not like, algebra. I don't remember much about algebra. Why? Because it's not something that's a part of what I do daily. But if I'm doing this daily and this is part of my craft, please like stay tuned into it in what you do. I memorize these tunes and I meditate on them and I practice them all the time. Okay, I'm constantly in the practice of doing it. That's a very important thing to keep in mind as you're developing. All right, very, 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 very important. All right, cool. Um, Let me see. Uh, what do I look forward to in a bass player? Well, two things I would say. What I look forward for in a bass player is a good sense of time and drive. Okay. One of my favorite bass players. Everybody knows I love Lucas Curtis. He's in my band. But another one of my favorite bass players from my generation is Chris Fun. When I had the opportunity to get a faculty together at Peabody, he was the first person to come to mind. Not just because he lived in the DMV, um, but because every time I play with him, I'm lifted. He's driving force. He's on top of the time. He's right there, and the harmonic structure is always there, and it's never in question. Chris Fun, one of my favorites. Obviously, Christian McBride, one of my favorites. Matt Penman, one of my favorites. Carlos Enriquez. These cats, they have extreme drive in their playing, and you always feel like you're comfortable. Okay, that's extremely important for me. So that's what I look forward to in a bass player. All right. Let's see. How much time do you spend on a transcription, and how do you know when to move on? I treat transcriptions like I treat cakes. It's done when it's done. You can't tell a cake when it's done. It's done when you can play it from beginning to end and it's memorized. When you can play it from beginning to end and it's memorized, that's when you're done. Okay. Also, for, like it's important to not, let me say it this way. A lot of times we put, like the opposite of what I said earlier is that we put these expectations on ourselves of when something is supposed to happen. Like, I'm going to know how to play over giant steps in 3 months. You can't gauge that. You can play over giant steps, but you can play over giant steps. So, although time itself is good in terms of scheduling, it's also a bad thing when you try to set time frames on when something is supposed to happen. And again, this is a great time in our world to just simply, excuse me, not be in time. I mean, there is no time limit to this. We don't know when we're going to come out of this. So I would suggest that whatever you're working on, be deliberate at what you're doing with it, focus on it, hit it every day, and then one day you're going to wake up and you can do it. That's just how it works. Nothing good comes like that. Nothing, or at least in my life. So I think it's important for us to all just take a step back. And when you're playing and you're working on something and it's not there yet, be patient. You have to be patient with this. And you're never done learning. You're never done. You never got it all together. And you got to keep it together. That's the important part about shedding. All right. All right. We're coming close to the end here. Brendan Davis had a good question. Do I feel that I have to change my style to adjust to different situations? Yeah, sometimes you might. It depends. Um, for me, when I'm playing in different situations, soloing specifically, is doing my best to allow what's coming from the rhythm section to basically dictate to me what I'm supposed to play. I don't see myself as soloist and then there's this rhythm section behind me. When I'm soloing, I see myself as the curator of musical events for the band at that time. But we're all one sound. So I'm listening to their sound to make sure that I could make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. So obviously, if I'm playing with Marcus Miller, that's a different set of groove. So I'm going to play differently with him than I would play with Jazz and Lincoln Center Orchestra, because it's a different rhythm section. It's a different beat concept, a different vibe, different harmonic structures. So I'm playing in the style that I'm playing in, but I'm also making sure that I have enough material that I could access from these different places to fit inside of the sound. All right? Listen, y'all, I appreciate you so much for your time. Just a couple final words. Check us out on openstudiojazz.com. There's a lot of good stuff on there. They're running a special, basically pay what you can, if you're interested in seeing what we have to offer there. A lot of great artists are on there. Um, Christian McBride, Diane Reeves, Warren Wolf, the list goes on and on. Peter Martin, thanks to Peter, Dan, Ian, everybody involved that I've known with Open Studio. I've been a part of the family for the past 2-3 years now. It's been a great thing. Thank y'all. I appreciate you. Thanks to all of y'all from all across the world. My friends in Spain, friends in China, Japan, friends everywhere, Europe, all over the world. And all over the world right now, we are in isolation. We can't be in each other's physical space. And that's hard, but we will come out of this and we will be a better race because of it. And I'm just looking forward to hearing all of these killing musicians that are really taking this opportunity to do just that. Be in the shed, hone in your craft, schedule, hold yourself accountable, have a plan. That's very important, y'all. Thank you so much. We'll do it again, and I'll get a better camera. See y'all soon.